Let me tell you the next gentleman, Lars. Now, Hedenborg, Lars Hedenborg, the reason some of you guys know that name is he's owned a coaching company. He says, you know, Gene, I knew about EXP, but then all of a sudden AJ left his coaching. And then even Cliff Freeman left his coaching company. He said, and Cliff Freeman shows up at one of his coaching events with an EXP hat on. And he says, take that hat off. He says, I was all against this company, right? And then he saw the light, right? He's got a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old daughter. Let's give it up for Lars. Come on, Hedenborg! Bring it on, baby! Love you, brother. Do it.
All right, so let's get to work here. AJ had me crying in the beginning, so I'm going to try to keep it together here. My inspiration in life and business is my dad in a very roundabout way. My dad's dream was to move to the U.S. From Sweden to open a hair salon, Renee of Sweden. And he owned this business for 33 years. But the ultimate E-myth, if you've ever read the book E-myth by Michael Gerber, you know, he was dyeing and coloring hair, he was cutting hair, but he was the guy, you know, cleaning up the end of the day, ordering the supplies, and barely making any money in this business. There were years where he didn't even take home 10 grand. And my parents divorced when I was 4 years old. And my dad, he was an active alcoholic until I was 15 years old. And so just a very challenging and chaotic childhood. A lot of fear, uncertainty in my life. And, you know, when my dad in 2009 had a major stroke, so he made some poor choices with his health. And he actually had a stroke when he was driving his motorcycle. He was dating his salsa instructor at the time, and I think he was like 72 years old. And he's got a Harley, and he's dating his salsa instructor. And even though he was absent in my life growing up, probably the saddest day of my life was when I was leaving the hospice facility. And you know, I had spent a few minutes with my dad after he'd passed away, and all of his possessions were in a little box. And among all of those possessions was, had to be 25 years worth of the little sobriety coins. And on the back of every one of those coins, and I can only appreciate this now, this is my dad's greatest gift to me. At the time growing up and in my adult life, getting advice from your dad in the form of AA slogans, it's triggering, and it wasn't great. You know, like easy does it, you know, one day at a time. And I get that it worked for him, you know, it kept him sober. But you know, these coins was his gift to me. And you know, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And it's just in the last year that I've realized that the power of this simple prayer. And so what I want to work on together today, the real estate market is a crazy market. The world is, I think, increasingly chaotic and crazy. So how do we win the game of business and live a life without regrets? Right? This industry has a way of just eating up our lives, and I don't want that for any of us. And so I took this challenging upbringing, and God bless my mother for being a rock and, you know, leaving my dad at age 4 with nothing, starting her own business, and she was successful in her own right, you know, working 6 days a week to make it happen for my sister and I. I chose the path of achievement, right? So I was not going to be like my dad. Failed husband, failed father, failed in business, failed in his physical body. And so, you know, I was an engineer, and then I went to investment banking on Wall Street, and even spent 6 months as a carpenter. Had a job where I traveled probably to 30 countries or so around the world, acquiring other businesses. And in all of those positions, even the first broker that I worked for, he had 3 physical locations, about 30 agents, but he was the top producing agent at that brokerage. Worked every evening and weekend, right? So in all of these things that I did, there wasn't the freedom that I was looking for. And so fast forward, my journey in real estate was one of leverage. I figured out how to sell a lot of homes early in my career, and that was not, leading to the life of freedom that I saw for my family. And I remember when my son was born, like vividly, I remember this. This is my first year in real estate, thinking I had left this cozy corporate job to get into real estate, and I was not going to let my son down, right? You're new to a marriage, you're new to fatherhood, and I was new to business. I hadn't sold anything before I got into real estate, and just not wanting to let him down. But it was really, really hard. I don't think at the time, he knew. You can sort of see he has no clue that I'm working. Raise your hand if you've ever been working a real estate deal when you should be with family. Raise your hand, so I'm not alone here, right? So it's really, really hard, the stuff that we go through. And in all of my journey, thousands of families served in real estate, over 1,000 agents have come through real estate B school, and there is no pot of gold or freedom at the end of the real estate production rainbow. And it's just a fact that we have to deal with. It's a great living, right? It's powerful. You can make a lot of money doing it, but there's nothing ongoing. So the mad scientist here, almost 15 years ago, to come up with this model and platform for us to be able to pivot a little bit of our time into just inviting people into, I didn't know Gene was going to tell that part of the story, where I was the hardest no to EXP of I promise any of you. And so that should be encouragement, that there are people that you're talking to now that are just shut down to EXP, and just don't end the conversation, just love them through it. So there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So let's talk about the inputs we can control. Who here wants to grow personally and professionally in a big way? Raise your hand. Despite the market, right? The market may not allow everyone to grow, but we're all here to achieve massive growth. With this serenity prayer in my head, realizing only recently, my dad's been passed away about 10 years ago now. So I've got increasingly, now I'm giving advice to my wife in the form of the serenity prayer, which I'm like, honey, God just grant you the serenity. And she's like, enough with the serenity prayer. This quote from Tim Tebow, don't worry about what you can't control. Our focus and energy needs to be on the things that we can control. Attitude, effort, focus. These are the things that we can control. So I want to spend a little bit of time unpacking this as it relates to your production business, perhaps your marriage or physical body, and certainly revenue share. So I ask myself the question, when it comes to these 3 things that we can control, where am I coming up short? I still have massive goals that I want to achieve in different areas of my life. So where am I coming up short? So the first one is attitude. I think I've given Tony Robbins as much money as you can give a person for coaching. Here's an awkward embrace in Fiji. And Tony says the only thing that's keeping you from getting what you want is the story you keep telling yourself. Live every day with an attitude of gratitude, as Rosie was saying. You can't always control the wind, but you can control your sails. What we focus on determines how we feel. So there are a few things with each of these areas that, kind of looking back on my journey and the folks that have kind of been through my world in real estate B school, I've kind of seen work for them. The first thing is that in order to have a decent attitude today and get excited about maybe doing the things that you don't feel like doing, you have to create a future, even if it's in your mind or written down or a vision board like AJ was talking about. Your future has to be bigger than your past. And so if you don't have a written vision, or go through a process and just go through the areas of your life that are important to you and just think out 3 years. What do you want that area of your life or business to look like? To get there, right, you may not know how you're going to get there, but as long as you have resourcefulness and you adopt a growth mindset and you never stop learning, there's no shortage of resources. The biggest difference on the inside of this brokerage is that there isn't anyone in this room that hasn't solved a problem that you're going through. And we're willing to share the answer, right? Raise your hand if you were at a brokerage where nobody in your brokerage would share anything with you. Hardly, right? And at this brokerage, it's like, what's your problem? We can solve it. Or you could easily be connected to someone that can give you the answer to it. The third thing, and Rosie covered this, but be grateful for what I do have in my life. So the risk with setting a vision that's far out is that you're always pursuing and striving, and you're never enjoying, what is today. So I dare everyone to just do the 5-Minute Journal app for 30 days. So just do 5-Minute Journal app on your phone for 30 days and watch everything change in your life, because you'll constantly be looking for all the things that are happening every day that are amazing and you're grateful for. So for me, and this is taken in April 2010, my angel is my wife. Real quick, a shameless plug for her podcast, Everyday Miracles Podcast. On YouTube, everyone subscribe. It's awesome. I'll get extra points for that one. So for me, it was, she came from a very challenging childhood as well. So neither of us had sort of any experience in building an amazing life. But my goal was to provide a life for my family that we never thought was possible. So that was my vision, and I was able to have the right attitude and energy and enthusiasm every day to be able to get there. So the question you have to ask yourself, if you're in a difficult position right now in terms of your attitude, is, what can you start or stop doing that can change your outlook or attitude? The second thing that we can control is the effort that we put in to an area of our life. I have a major crush, bromance with Mike Michalowicz. Raise your hand if you've read like Profit First or Clockwork, or all of his books are really, really awesome. But he said you can go far on hard work and big dreams, often a hell of a lot farther and faster than people with more education and experience. So the first part, and this is a saying that we use all the time, is marry the process, divorce the results. So when it comes to your production business, you commit to the process of having 20, 25, 30 meaningful conversations a day with would-be buyers and sellers. You're not attached to what happens in those conversations, right? Either you suck at the conversations and you'll get better over time, or eventually people are going to say yes to meet with you and do business with you. The same thing goes for your revenue share business. The first time I called, started making my calls, it was, I was just committed to the process of doing it, right? AJ had shared his process with me and the numbers, and I was like, all right, it's on. So I was married to the process, and I was not attached to the outcome. And then there isn't a part of growth that's comfortable, whether it's hiring your first administrator or even first time I gave a listing presentation and asked a seller for as much money as we ask sellers for. It's all uncomfortable. And I had a big fish that I was pursuing in the early days. The first call I made to him, he called me back right afterwards. He said, Lars, you sounded really nervous. I just want to give you some free coaching. You sounded really nervous. And I said, I am nervous. Like, I was the hard no, right? I was the guy that was like, it's a distraction. It's not ready. It's not fully, built out or whatever. So really uncomfortable, those conversations. But now I just know they're all coming, and it's just, you're just planting seeds. The third part, and probably the hardest part, is to be honest about where you're spending your time, right? You can't set these goals in different areas of your life that you say are important to you, and then it turns out that you're spending your time doing a whole bunch of stuff that isn't aligned with those goals. Who here has ruined a family vacation by working on a deal, or pissed off your spouse? I asked Julie last night, why did you take this picture? And she said, I was so pissed at you. She remembers this like it was yesterday, and this was probably 2010. She remembers like it was yesterday. So focus is the third thing we can control. I studied brief time with Bruce Lee, and he said, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. So I belong to a Christian business owners organization called C12, and it's fierce accountability to the point where they talk to your team and your spouse once a year. Jessica and Stacy can attest to this if you get a chance to talk to them. And if you're not in alignment, so priorities are what we do, everything else is just talk. That's the guiding principle of this group. And they'll know if you're out of alignment, right? It's easy to say my family's important to me, or my faith is important to me, or taking care of my body or my kids, but then when you look at your calendar and where you're spending your time or your money, it's just not in alignment. So that one was a big one. I was blessed recently to be able to take 30 days away from my business. And it was like away from my business. Deleted social media, didn't check email for 30 days. And to realize, I've always been good at this, but to realize that there's so much noise in the world that doesn't impact where I want to go. And if you ever have the chance, even for a week, to get out of the noise, you'll realize what's important to you. So quiet my world by reducing noise from the world. And then this one, mainly from social media, but stop comparing what's going on inside of your world to what everyone else is putting out there, right? When I go on Instagram, within 5 minutes, I get a headache. Because I'm like, everyone's better looking than me, their kids look smarter, like, it's awful. Like, how can they go on this vacation? But you're looking at 100 lives, the best of 100 lives all the time that's coming at you. And so just be careful of that. And I haven't gone back to social media, so I don't think I'll go back to social media. It's just part of the noise. So if you can see the middle picture here. So my wife started doing this thing where she takes pictures of me. And I was literally on the plane this morning, and I caught myself in this exact position. The middle picture says, I never dreamed I'd grow up to be the world's hottest husband. And then in my fat roll, you can't see the last part of it. It says, but here I am crushing it. And I woke up, and she had this picture, and she was giggling. Guess what the first thing I said was? Do not post that on Facebook. I was so pissed at her for taking it. Now she has a whole album, about 50 pictures like this. And I ran this picture on a Facebook ad for my coaching company. It was the best performing ad we've ever had, right? Because nobody's real anymore on anything, it seems like. So I'm gonna end with this. I got the chance to study under Dan Sullivan for a few years. And this kind of encompasses, when I think of my dad and the amount of regret that he must have had, or the amount of regret, I don't regret a lot of things, but the regret that I felt in that took him about 5 years from the stroke for him to pass away. And I would bring my kids to visit with him every Sunday, and it was just, we just never had much of a relationship. And so just the amount of regret that I felt in that relationship, but this quote is really powerful. Someone once told me the definition of hell. The last day you have on earth, the person you became will meet the person you could have become. And I read that, and I was like, but here's the bright side, because this is a little heavier, and I get it, is that there's no shame or blame for where you are right now. Dana shared with me this sort of concept. He says the beauty of it all is that where you are right now, everything you've experienced is, he would call it R&D, research and development, for what's to come, right? So it's just fuel for what's coming next. So if you're struggling in your marriage, or you could hardly afford to get to this event, or you don't have a relationship with your kids, or your physical body is failing, or you haven't started with revenue share yet, and you know you should, you just start from today, and all the things that you've learned, it's going to give you the fuel to be able to move forward in life. I'm going to end with a very simple prayer for all of us. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thank you.
All right. Lars Hedenborg, everybody!